still.
You know what did that? Our fancy new agenda software did that.
Just the possible.
Yeah, but it didn't put it all on one page.
That.
If I were doing it myself, I would have done that.
That's fanciness.
Software didn't do that though. There may be some more. I just want to make sure we get it. I don't have a form. I want to make sure we get it. He brought his toothbrush.
All right. Is the mic on? All right. I think I'm good. That's open. Just give me 2 seconds. I'm trying to make sure everything's open and.
Much about how to adjust that.
Good? Everybody good? All right, it is 5:45. I will call the meeting to order. If everybody would stand for silence and pledge. All right, Dr. Horrell, I believe we have some special guests.
We do have some special guests. We have Jacob and Joshua Manns, and they are here working on their Boy Scout badges. I believe public engagement or community meetings or something like that. I goofed that part. Just go with it. Okay, thank you. two of Lakeland's finest. They are very involved students, great students, and involved in the fine arts among other things. And we're very proud to have them here. Lead the pledge. So we'll let you take it from here.
Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank y'all so much. Madam Recorder, if you would call the roll, please.
Chair Laura Harrison.
Here?
Vice Chair Jeremy Burnett. Keith Acton.
Here.
Deborah Thomas.
Present.
Michelle Childs. Here. Superintendent Horrell.
Here.
We do have a quorum. I'd like to welcome everyone to our July business meeting. We have a very long agenda, so if anybody needs a break as we go along, please speak up and we can take a recess as well if you don't want to go all the way through. So I'll just let y'all know that in the beginning. Dr. Horrell, if you would please lead us through our agenda.
Yes, our first item is the opportunity for public comment.
Would anyone from the public like to speak? Hearing none, next item.
Next item is the legislative representative update from our report section.
Childs.
Currently, the General Assembly is not in session. There has been talk, as we mentioned in the past, there may be a special session called in August. If there is, I will definitely update everyone on what occurs during that meeting.
Childs, appreciate it as always. Next item.
Next item is the superintendent's report. I do have a few things I want to share with the board and the public. First of all, I want to thank all the staff who worked on both monitoring and recovering from, and then recovering from again, the outages that we had at the schools. We were in the middle of having our summer learning camps, and unfortunately those were interrupted. We had very successful 3 weeks of summer learning camp with the kids that attended, and really proud of those kids for the extra work that they put in over the summer. We also had a group of our third graders that came in the week after the camps ended to make sure that they got the time they needed to wrap up in that oh so important this year third grade summer learning camp based on the third grade retention law. But really so many employees that took the time to just, you know, when you're at your house, it's fairly obvious when the power's on and when it's off. And when you're trying to wait for a school building to come up, sometimes it's not obvious. Things come on, and even at LSS we find out the building can have power, but the lights don't come on until you flip the breaker switch at LPS in particular. So Tori Johnson, the fabulous new plant manager at LES, was really integral in that effort. Corey Martin was back and forth and up and down all the time. Jeremy Hayes, our new maintenance and facilities manager, were tremendous, but also had a lot of employees that kept on working from home to make sure that things like payroll and other HR processes that needed to happen continue to happen. So really just a shout out to everybody. They handled it very professionally, very well. And again, thank you to all the MLGW crew and administration that worked to keep us updated and get so many people back online. I know it was a struggle for lots of folks, but we're always grateful for those partnerships. Probably the most shocking news of the day is that teachers report back to work on July 26th. And that's just over 2 weeks away, basically. The new teachers come back on the 25th, and we'll get started with the school level new teacher orientation. The first day of school, I'm sorry to report, students, if you haven't looked, we have several student visitors, is August 7th. But it's going to be a really exciting and great and fun and challenging school year in Lakeland school system. You're going into, as I've noted every year on the benchmark, we're going into the 10th year of Lakeland school system, which means that August 2024 will be the 10th anniversary of Lakeland school system. So that'll be 10 years from the first day of school, which was August of 2014. And I know the board was elected and I was hired 6 months before, but to me, and I think to y'all, the first day is really when those kids came back, and what a day that was in August of 2014. So we'll be celebrating a big birthday party a year from now, but going into the 10th year is also exciting to think about it. This is the last week of our summer schedule as far as the central office goes. We have some employees that work long days, Monday through Thursday, and then we close the central office on Fridays, as the board knows. But even that is coming to an end as we wrap up and get back into preparing for the teachers and the students every day of the school week. I want to share just a couple other things. Lakeland School System and a number of school systems will participate in the Tennessee Department of Education's cybersecurity program. There's a state strategic technology solutions team that's going to help our school systems complete the nationwide cybersecurity review self-assessment. That is a new thing and something that Dr. Terrell will be taking the lead on, and is basically another opportunity to see how are we doing kind of on some national benchmarks with regards to our preparation for cybersecurity. If I had to guess, I think we will come out as likely ahead of the pack, because really under Dr. Terrell's leadership, she's constantly thinking about how to make sure that our network, our students, our staff are protected against potential cybersecurity breaches. As Speaking of technology, got a lot of folks that have been working on our new and updated website. We don't have a release date for that nailed down, but we've made a lot of terrific progress and just tightening up some things so that it's really cool when it launches. Want to compliment the business department. They hosted their new teacher orientation, the second of two today, which focuses more on the things you need to know from kind of a technical side, I guess, a business side. How do you get a sub? How do you get paid? How do you get your benefits? What do you do if you're going to be absent? A number of other things. Who do you call if you need certain things? And once they get back with the schools themselves, they'll focus obviously more on instruction and academics and culture and the day-to-day in the schools. But that was a great thing. Got a lot of planning going on right now for In-Service Week. The highlight of the 3 days of our In-Service Week, you probably think I'm about to say is my presentation. It's not. That's not what I'm going to say. That is the last day. The highlight is really going to be, we have 3 days of the Solution Tree PLCs at Work. We are bringing the PLCs at Work conference essentially to Lakeland, and every member of our teaching staff will be part of that for 3 days. So we are dedicating a lot of time of our in-service week to that. There is a tremendous amount of excitement about it. We've been able over the years to send groups of teachers to the PLCs at Work conference, and they always come back energized and excited and with a lot more clarity about truly what it means to be a professional learning community. That's something, board members, you've heard me talk about annually, but there's nothing like getting it straight from the source, and we really feel like this is going to be the culmination of a lot of years of capacity building. We've got some folks that I think have a really good understanding. I think this is going to open a lot of eyes and really help move us forward instructionally in that regard. So I'm very, very excited about that. Speaking of excitement, Cody Duncan, the new deputy principal, has officially started at LPS, so he is now working full-time assisting Ms. Martin, and I know they've been knocking out a lot of good work already and have given me some updates, and I think that's going to be a huge improvement. On the construction side, we've got, you may have noticed if you've been over there, we've got heavy equipment on site on the on-campus soccer field. Some of the infrastructure work has already begun in terms of the new drainage and moving where the irrigation systems are to make sure that that works. The next thing that you'll see get started is the road to the annex that will extend from the bus loop on campus. I will note, just in the interest of transparency, we do have a issue that's, well, I'll say it's not an issue so much as a delay with the permitting on Campus Drive. There's a Waters of the State issue because Campus Drive will go over what is essentially an overflow from the pond that is on the adjoining property. Then it requires some additional remediation and permitting and some things that we've run into that we're going to keep us from pulling the trigger right away. But I'll keep you updated on that. It's still going to happen, obviously, and we'll meet our deadline. We're going to have a meeting this week to get an update on the central office design. My understanding is that the team at Renaissance Group is nearing completion of the construction documents and seeking some additional input there. From an HR perspective, we do have some classified positions still open, but as of right now, keep your fingers crossed, all of our certified positions have been filled at both schools, or the offers have been accepted in one case, the most recent one. So feeling good about that with the time that we've got left, and just got some great folks, got to meet some of them today at the new teacher orientation, and just a lot of excitement in the room. And do want to note that we've seen a lot of equipment come in from our the Innovative Schools grant that we were awarded by the state of Tennessee for our BioSTEM program, and Mr. Sweeney has been very, very busy putting work together and setting up our clean room and a number of other things that are going to make our BioSTEM and STEM lab, I believe, one of, if not the premier labs in Shelby County. So I'm very, I shouldn't say labs. We have St. Jude and Le Bonheur and some really tough labs to compete with. Educational, certainly high school educational labs in Shelby County. So we're excited about that as well. And at this point, that concludes my report, and I'll take any questions you have.
Dr. Worrell?
Oh, Sue, you may not know this, but on the central office design, the room that we would hold board meetings, will it be like this size, bigger, smaller?
It's a little bit bigger.
Okay.
Not a whole lot bigger, but it is a little bit bigger than this room.
Any more questions? Can you give an update, just kind of a real high level about the construction timeline for like the soccer field? When do we expect like the current phase and like kind of what does it look like going into the fall? Just a really high level, just for everybody, what the construction and the road going to the annex, kind of with the bus loop and any effects there.
There is a piece of paper on my desk that has the answer to all those questions, and I'm not, as you've learned, I'm not going to go from memory. It will go, there's none of it that will be complete by the time school starts, certainly, which I think is fairly obvious. The soccer field is the one that we hope to get turned around. I do recall this one. I think I can say this. Right now, the coordination is that the new sod would go on the soccer field the first week in August is when we tentatively have that scheduled. And then obviously you got to give it some time to root. And we're hoping that with the summer weather still going, if we keep it watered, that we'll have enough time to get rocking and rolling. I know the road and the additional parking that goes over to the annex will continue into the fall semester. But there is also an understanding that so will the use of those fields. So there's no point in our discussions now that it will not be accessible to either city or school programs over there. So I'm not going to give an end date on that one, but it does go into
I was looking at it this weekend, the annex side, and it was staked off, so you could get a visual understanding where things were going to go.
Yeah. And Campus Drive, obviously, the only hard deadline we have is that it is ready for the start of school next year. And so this little permit thing we were hoping it would all start at the same time. But I will note that even in the original phasing, it was going to be started last, but we may lose 4 to 6 weeks, is my understanding, to get this worked out.
Okay.
Yep.
And just for everybody's reminder, there's going to be traffic issues as we add another grade for the public to hear. There's going to be traffic issues. They're going to work them out the first 2 weeks of school or 3 weeks of school or whatever they got to do. So just come with your patience and everybody be prepared as we get the road. Certainly Campus Drive finished to 70. Hopefully that will calm some of that down, but it's a process. So just reminding all the public, reminding everybody, just bring your patience.
Well, and also recognize that the administration, they can't predict what it's gonna be like. They know there are problems, so 100 people don't need to call them because they know, and they'll figure it out in that first week of school, so.
Yep. Thank you for that note. And
Yeah. All right. Any more questions or discussion? All right, next item.
All right, next, I do want to note the monthly financial summary. July is a special month because that is over. The July financial summary, which typically speaks to the end of the previous month, is always delayed because June is the end of the fiscal year. So there's a number of additional processes that have to happen before Ms. Rosales can comfortably say, this is the June report, because the June report is the final report for the year for all purposes, so there is no financial summary.
Just noted that'll be here in
August, yeah.
Okay. All right. Any questions? Hearing none, next item.
The next item is the approval of the agenda.
I think there was one item you said you wanted to add.
There is. I'm requesting that we add an item 32, which is discussion action on approval of interlocal agreement with Collierville Schools for transportation services.
Is there a motion to add this item?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, this item has been added. Is there any other items that the board would like to add or remove from the agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as amended. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is the consent agenda.
There's no items on the consent agenda, so we will move on to the next item.
All right, we will move to our discussion action items.
Still writing the Carterville School.
Okay.
Because I don't want to forget it. First item on the agenda is the approval of the special call meeting minutes for June 5th. Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is approval of business meeting minutes from June 12th, 2023.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion regarding the business meeting minutes for June 12th? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is approval to execute a contract with Engage Systems for Centegic's Crisis Response System.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second? A second. We have a motion and a second. Dr. Hoare, will you speak to this item?
Yeah, I would like to speak to this because I think this is important and potentially exciting, and I think something that the community would certainly be interested in. At the board's behest, and certainly in the interest of the students and the faculty and staff in Lakeland School System, we have, as we constantly are, been talking about ways to improve safety and security on our campuses. And one of the things that came up in those discussions was how can we reduce in any way possible the response time from the time that there is any sort of emergency, but certainly the worst type of imaginable emergency where we have somebody that's on campus trying to harm students or staff. So I did some research on different approaches to this. As you can imagine, there are lots of vendors that try to provide these services. But the one that stood out from the research was a system called Centegic's, and it is a rapid incident response system. And it's fairly simple, as I think a lot of great solutions are sometimes. And it's basically a portable Bluetooth badge that all staff would carry with them in addition to their ID badge. I have an ID badge that I carry with me. This would be a second badge that would be on here, but about the same size, and it would have a button. And long story short, what Centegic's does through their partner Engage Systems is they map out the entirety of both campuses. They identify on the map the specific location with room numbers, with building numbers, for including the outside parts of the campus. And like I said, very simple, long story short, but if there's an emergency of any kind, and I want to emphasize that, if you have a student that falls out from the heat, which is something that could happen today, it's basically a matter of that employee hitting that button, and it does depend on how many times you hit the buttons, but it would send an alert either to the administration and anybody else we program in, or if it's an emergency where 911 needs to be called right away, then there is a sequence of hitting the button, and I assure you it's easy to learn, where the basically emergency response technician would be on the scene as quickly as possible, law enforcement, whoever. It would essentially be a call to 911. So we already have a number of things in our buildings. We have panic buttons, we have intercoms, we have dedicated lines that go to the police. We know everybody's got cell phones, but cell phones are unreliable, as we also know, especially in the building. This is a system that does use a repeater that would take the Bluetooth signal outside of the building and make the calls. And I talked to the superintendent in Bristol City Schools, who I've got a great working relationship with, and she said they implemented it at 2 schools as a pilot a couple of years ago, and she said they love it, and they're putting it in the rest of their schools right away. And she said they use it in the high school nearly every day for some reason or another. Because you can use it for something as simple as, it could be any situation where somebody needs medical treatment, but in the very worst case scenario, an employee would just hit the button. If they hit the button over and over and over and over again, any employee, then it'll immediately dispatch emergency services. So I think this is something that would improve safety. I think it would also improve people's sense of safety, which is important in the building. And I think it would be a really good investment to the school system and address a lot of the needs that we've been discussing, in the last year. I'm recommending that the board approve this, and I think I know what the next question would be, is how long would it take to get this in? If we pulled the trigger this week following a board approval today, then they're looking at probably a fall break-ish on either side of that kind of implementation.
Discussion on this item? Mr. Atkins?
Thank you. Can you help me understand the payment terms on this? I'm seeing 23-9 due upon the PO date, order date, and then 23-9 due upon 90 days PO date, order date. So, 7-8 due. So I know that you have the annual rate, the two sites coming in at 29,000. And I know there's setup costs here. I'm just doing my math one more time to see if those add up. It looks like the 47.8 covers the setup. That would tie back. So just confirming the 23.9 at the beginning and 23.9 due upon 90 days PO date covers both the first term and the setup. I think it does.
Yes,
I
it's
just wanna
roughly
confirm.
48,000, what would that be, 47,800, if I did that right, for the first year. Then you pay that in 2 installments. One would be, as soon as we can get the PO done, and then the other would be 90 days from then.
Just wanted to confirm.
Yeah, I think we got it.
Okay.
I'm repeating it back to make sure I'm correct.
I had to do the math, yeah, sure, but it looks right. And then second, have they done a full check on our school layout to make sure they are accounting for enough repeaters? And as you know, there's some dead spots in the school as far as cell coverage goes.
Great question. Yes, they have. They have. We sent them a map, and they have viewed the layout of the campus and didn't see any issues.
I have no further questions.
Once upon a time, I was teaching in a set of portables that was really far from the main building. It was a little bit different time. But if I had that situation now, this would be so much comfort to me to know that if I needed somebody for a medical reason or a weather reason or whatever the reason is, that this would be available. Our campus is so large, and we have so many spaces that are being used by the kids and the teachers all the time, even after school. Will this extend down towards athletic facilities as
Yes.
well?
Yes.
Okay, so wherever you're carrying your badge, you can hit it, and it will go either to LPS people, or it will go out to the 911
That's correct.
response teams.
Yep.
Okay,
Include Friday
so-
night football game.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
this, I want our teachers to feel safe. I want our kids to feel safe. I want the teachers to know that if they need help, it is coming. So I think this is a wonderful investment, and it will be expandable. I'd like to see it expanded down the road when we build our next school, if we have a favorable view of it. I would like to see it, and even with our new office, our central office, I'd like for that to be covered as well when we get that up and running, if we like the results that we get from piloting it at LPS and LES.
I won't do my usual and say everything's been said. I need to say it again. So what Mr. Acton and Ms. Thomas said, absolutely. But one question I forgot to ask you beforehand. Does this also cover the annex?
Yes. Yes.
I thought it did. I just wanted to confirm. So, okay. Thank you.
Also, you mentioned the Bristol City Schools, that they use it every day. Like, I mean, what are they, I'm just curious, like, what is a daily use that they would use it for?
For example, if there's a fight, if there's any sort of disruption, they can use it to basically get an administrator to it. It
Kind of
could
use
be.
it in lieu of a radio or something?
Well, we have panic buttons in the room that you can use to call the office, and the office can call and get somebody, but this would be and she said like every day, and she said, well, at least every week. I may have, maybe I didn't report that accurately, but she did say they use it on a regular basis for things beyond like worst case,
Yeah.
scenario
Well,
emergencies.
no, and to echo what they said,
If somebody
definitely-
had a seizure, for example, this is,
Yeah.
instead of trying to get somebody to go get a radio or hitting a panic button, they may do this.
wonder if they,
More discussion? I do have one question. Is this within our 23-24 budget, or is there gonna be a budget amendment required to approve this?
I believe Ms. Rosales, that there would not be a budget amendment, that she was able to find it, I
Would
think.
this fall under any of, they passed all that new stuff about security, and I thought some of it could include things you bought.
It absolutely can, and this
Okay.
is the kind of thing, we do a whole lot of reclassification when grants come up. This is something that absolutely be eligible, I believe,
I think it
for
would be from what
reclassifying
they-
under that grant.
Yeah.
But regardless, we just want to make sure
Yeah.
we do have the money available.
and you alluded to that in a note, so,
Okay.
yeah.
More discussion?
No.
Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is approval of the 23-24 annual agenda.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell?
The annual agenda is something that we update, as you know. You have it before you, board. This is a tool for the board to use and for the central office to use to make sure we're on the same page of the things that need to be done annually.
On this item.
Are we going to add the school level volunteer recognition that we talked about, the,
Timeline of it. Is that the TSBA Volunteer of the Year?
well, yes, but I think related to that, were we gonna have a concurrent kind of celebration for our volunteers? Do we need to add that to the annual agenda, or just know that that's when we would do it?
It's certainly easy to add, we can add it to the annual agenda, sir.
Second, Ms. Thomas's
Are you making a motion
friendly
to amend?
motion. maybe.
Yes, I am making a motion
Which
to
month?
amend the, April. What? There are slashes already there, let's add another slash, and we can do slash, school level volunteers of the year.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We are back on the main motion. Any discussion on the agenda as amended? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is approval of the 23-24 professional development plan.
A motion to get this item on the floor.
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Hoare, will you speak to this one?
Yeah, this is an annual requirement of the state of Tennessee and LSS policy that the board approves the PD plan.
Is there any discussion on the professional development plan, 23-24?
I was gonna ask, mine's, I had to reload mine, but I remember the first two. Can you give us details about the first two? The third one was PLCs. Again, it's spinning. I'm getting the spinning circle of death right here, but, what were the first two focuses? One was about
State assessment design and backwards planning. And
Yes.
then reading, language arts, and math.
you give us details or a little further information on the first one?
Yeah, the first one does, I mean, it's related to professional learning communities because it's basically making sure you understand what the assessment at the end of the year is going to be and planning your lessons accordingly. It's
Okay.
similar to something I talked about in service last year, but it's also been a theme, and I think we've seen a lot of progress there, but have more work to do, making sure that everything that happens in the classroom is aligned to a standard, essentially that is going to be covered on the assessment, because as we've discussed, all the standards are summarized in the state assessment. So just spending time, giving the resources, making sure the teachers are given the time to get together and kind of workshop those things together, and that's part of one of the things that they do. Call it a data dig is part of what they do with some of that time, is that the teachers get together and they review the results of the previous year's assessments and try to figure out where the weak spots are, and then look at the upcoming assessment and then make sure that the planning all leads to that.
More discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is updates to the LSS Facilities Use Agreement.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
We have a motion. I'll make the second. Dr. Hoare, will you speak to this one? I'm trying to find it on my.
Yes, this is one we've now carried over a couple of times, and I think the last time we didn't take action on it is because we only had 3 here present, and there was a sense that we ought to have more representation here. We basically have 2 proposals for our facilities use agreement. One is a 2-group category proposal that essentially says that the only groups that would be permitted to use the school facilities, Lakeland Elementary and Lakeland Preparatory School, would be groups that are either school groups or groups that are associated with the school via booster clubs or other school support organizations or the city of Lakeland. So that would be it, that essentially if we got requests from outside groups that said we would like to use the facilities or rent the facilities, that we would say that's not permitted under our facilities use agreement. There's a 3-group category that was also requested that adds a 3rd category that would be a nonprofit community group whose benefits go to charity, community projects, or school projects. Their primary purpose is to serve the community with worthwhile educational, civic, or charitable activities. That is the version that is passed. That means that there would be a fee structure, and any groups that reached out to use the facilities in those categories would then go through a vetting process. They would go through the insurance process. There would be fees assigned to them, and then they would make the decision about whether or not to rent the facilities.
Discussion on this item. Mr. Burnett.
I'll be happy to, because I think I'm the one driving the 3-group category. And that group 3, as Dr. Hurl said, is the nonprofit community groups. To date, in 9.5, almost 10 years, we've had that happen exactly once, I believe.
A successful rental. We've had a number of them that have gone through the process, but yes.
And it was a church group that wanted to meet on one day. And again, as the examples are listed, scouting groups, as we have scouts in the room tonight, church groups, charity organizations. I just don't want to close the door on those groups. I'd like to leave the door open for those groups to still meet, knowing that we don't have tons of requests and demand for that. I would advocate that that's still a worthwhile group to leave in the mix.
More discussion? I do want to clarify, and I think Dr. Horrell explained this before, is that it's not that we don't get requests repeatedly from the groups, it's that they haven't been successful. So there is a demand, there is an ask, there is work on our staff that, that takes place just when the requests are made. Those do come repeatedly, more than just this one. So the 1 in 9.5 years has just been the successful one, but there have been, and I don't know how many there are on average in a year, but there have been requests which require work on behalf of the staff. And I think I said, I wasn't at the last meeting, but 2 meetings ago, my major concern is we don't know what we don't know. Just like this year, when we went into this year, or this past year, let's say 22, 23, there was a thought that things were going to be a certain way, and they ended up being slightly, in some cases, significantly different than how we thought the demand on our school admin or things like that were going to be. So I'm not opposed to letting groups, to opening it up to other groups in some point in the future, but I'm not in favor of doing it at this point, at least for the 23-24 year. And all that to say is I think it also would be worthwhile, and I should have done it before this, but I just thought of it while we were sitting here discussing it, maybe have it on our annual agenda, review each year to say, do we want to make updates to this or not? So that might be worthwhile to have on our annual agenda as times change or things change, to add it to our annual agenda. So it might be worthwhile to have this specific item on our annual agenda.
And I will note on the annual agenda, throughout the year, all it takes is a board member to say, please add that to the annual agenda. There is a board policy that says you have to annually approve an annual agenda, but there's nothing that stops us from updating it throughout the year. We could add it right now. I mean, if that was something.
So personally, I would like to make a motion to approve the 2 group categories. That's my personal preference. So, and I think I've explained, or I've said repeatedly, I'm not opposed to outside groups. I just don't think the timing is right now for our staff and the demands on our staff and what we don't know about our schools yet, and what it looks like at year 2 and 3 and 4 as we have the high school fully built out. And certainly, if this year smooths out, that's why I say we should have it on our annual agenda and say, okay, we're ready, it's smooth, our staff can take this on, and we're ready to do that, so.
So the two group categories, that includes city groups and school-related groups. And I'm also more inclined to the two group categories right now, not only because if you've been on our campus, you know that we just, we surpassed last year what kinds of space we thought we would have and how many groups we would have using this and that, and we still had, you know, in some cases, school groups double booked for a single space. And also, you know, this is like schools, and so I feel like it is in our best interest to acknowledge ops that help fund our schools, and that we need to think about our citizens in our city before we open it up to other groups that may be from outside just wanting to come to use our facilities. So I think caution is in order right now, and I would agree with you that we can look at it again in the future, but that right now the two group categories is a better fit for us. We're growing, we're adding another grade. We'll only add more, you know, programs and after school and before school, and who knows, even, you know, competitions on weekends, we, you know, might be hosting things and that sort of thing. So I don't want us to say yes, and then we this thing up, and then we're trying to pull it back so that we can make sure our school groups are covered.
I'll move for the two group. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the two group policy?
Going to come up to a point to where the three group makes sense. I'd like to see us get, as you have alluded, we know what we have, and it's the burdens on the staff are my concern. And that can be multiple items, from just time commitments, the administrative part. So looking at this and given the time and the multiple conversations that we've had, I'm going to lean towards the two group categories for now.
Question on this item? Hearing none, all in favor of the two group category, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay?
We have, was it four, one, that sounds so weird. 4, 1 against. Motion passes.
Can we, so on the two group categories one, we need to change the wording on page 5. Just say political uses of facilities. A 5.
Of 12.
You're saying amend it? State your motion.
I move that we amend B to say political uses of facilities, because that would fall under city purposes, correct?
Yeah, that was yes, that was a miss. We struck the first two because they related specifically to religious uses, but you're right, it's no longer applicable to have the word religious or.
Then it'll just become the only paragraph under that, right? 3 will
Yes.
become the only, okay.
So on page 5, number B, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So everybody clear on her motion to amend?
Is to remove the words religious or?
Correct.
I second that motion.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And so just for clarity, I'd like to approve the policy, or the policy as amended. So is there any discussion on the policy as amended? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of approving the policy as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay?
So motion passes, right? Okay, just making sure we did it in the right order. Okay.
4 ayes and 1 nay.
Yes.
Okay.
Right, next item.
Next item is update to the 23-24 school fees list.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
Motion.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell, will you speak to this?
These are your requests for additional fees for the schools.
I do see where it looks like a duplication or a typo.
AP Environmental, Chemistry and Biology, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought maybe it was just something with BOE Connect. I didn't know.
So is it fine to have a clerical amendment, or do we need to actually make a formal amendment to?
Is it just repeated? Is that what it is?
Yes, the chemistry and biology are at the bottom of page 1, and then AP Science, Environmental Science is the top of page 2, and then it goes chemistry, biology, AP Science again.
Oh, we can do that administratively.
Any objection to
No
administrative?
objection.
Okay. Hearing none, any more discussion about the required fees for 23-24?
I like how it's laid out. I do. It's really
That would
easy
be
to see.
Jessica Millspau's work.
Miss Spa, it's very well laid out.
Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is approval of update to policy 1.102 board members.
Trying to flip back and forth.
I have to
between
say,
the
when I
agenda.
saw this, I thought, gonna tell us we're gonna have to have a special election. I didn't know what was going on. When you see the board members policy
Yeah.
come up, you just don't know.
Well, and I'll introduce this whole
Let me get a
massive.
motion to get it on the floor.
Absolutely.
I'll make a motion, and we have a motion and a second. So now, go ahead. I'll let you speak to it.
Absolutely. This is the first of many of what I sometimes call the June policy dump, where they take all of the legislative updates from the past year, and TSBA puts them into policy form and recommended policy, and that's what the vast majority of these are. Many of these are things that we really have very little discretion over. It just changes in state law that therefore must be reflected in school policy. And I will note, because this question comes up sometimes, even if it's not in our policy, if for some reason we didn't make these policy updates, we are still subject to the state law. If somebody said, oh my gosh, we didn't get that policy passed in time, it doesn't really matter. We're still liable for meeting the requirements of the law once the law goes into effect. So this is the first of many.
Discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is approval of update to policy 1.106, Code of Ethics.
I'll make a motion to get this item on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, Dr. Horrell.
This adds a section regarding the point of contact for the Tennessee Ethics Commission. In our policy, it would be the board chair.
Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on policy 1.400, school board meetings.
Make a motion to get this item on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, Dr. Horrell.
This is a change that allows, well, there's a couple of changes from the law. These are based on state law. It changes the qualifying reasons that board members can attend electronically, and this will be of interest to board members certainly and the public. It basically increases the number of times and the categories of things through which a board member could attend a school board meeting electronically. If they're out of the country due to work, you can do that twice per year for that reason. For example, you have to give 5 days notice to the chair and the superintendent if you intend to do that. If you are sick or in a period of convalescence, you may participate electronically 3 times per year for that reason. So these are very different. This does, go ahead.
Out of the county, not country. I mean, you could be out of the country.
Oh, thank you. Okay, thank you. So I guess if you're in the county but not in the city, you can't do it. Inclement weather or natural disasters 3 times per year. And then the military service is there. So just more state law changes.
Discussion?
Motion approved.
What? I'm sorry.
Motion to approve.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on policy 1.402, notification of meeting.
Make a motion to get this item on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
There's been a lot of discussion about public comment at school board meetings, and I do want to note, our school board has been very proactive on this, and there's another policy that we're going to talk about where the school board, I believe, is very encouraging of public comment and allows a wide variety of public comment on any number of issues. This one notes that in notices of all meetings, they must include information on how community members can participate in the public comment portion of the board meeting, and we are working with our BOE Connect representative to make sure that that is implemented with fidelity and automatically when the notice goes out.
Discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on policy 1.404, appeals to and appearances before the board.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horl?
Yeah, well, again, I want to compliment the board. We didn't make a lot of changes to this. There's a lot of boards that are I guess under the situation where they have to make a lot of changes to this, but you guys had spent a considerable amount of time updating this policy previously to be very clear about what are the requirements for those who wish to speak before the board. So really all we needed to add was that there is a public comment for every meeting with actionable items on the agenda. Now that would include special called meetings, which is, that is a bit of a change in terms of procedure and in the law, with the exception of teacher disciplinary hearings.
Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item, discussion action on policy 3.202, the emergency preparedness plan.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horl?
Yes, this speaks to some new state law regarding annual drills, armed intruder drill, an incident command drill, and an emergency safety bus drill. That is a new requirement of state law.
Discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on policy 3.204, threat assessment team.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horl?
Interestingly, the threat assessment team is something that Lakeland School System already had in place as a procedure. This makes it the state law and policy, and discusses some of the specifics of the threat assessment team, but this is, again, already been implemented essentially.
Discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on policy 3.205, security.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Second.
Yes, this is one that, as a board, we have discussed both publicly through Ms. Child's updates and then individually. We did some advocacy work on this to try to improve this bill and believe that we did, but the crux of the bill is that, and this is a very good thing, and I think frankly should be the law. All exterior doors leading into a school building shall be locked at all times, and access to the school buildings is limited to the school's primary entrance during the school day, as well as when students are present outside of regular school hours. One of the things that did change in the law is it did add some flexibility on the after-school hours, and essentially says that if the board approves a policy allowing there to be different procedures after school hours, then schools may implement those things. So what this policy says is the superintendent shall develop procedures limiting access to the buildings when parents and members of the public are invited to attend events, which is a lot of times during the school year. We have to be very open and transparent about that. There are a lot of times where we invite parents and students into the building after school. That's athletic events, fine arts performances, open houses, parents' meetings, et cetera, and lots of et ceteras there. To the extent practical, these procedures will involve the supervision of entrances by district representatives approved by the superintendent. That's when it's practical, and we're going to put some procedures in place to make sure we're doing the best job that we can in those after-school events.
Any discussion on this item? I do have one question. I know it says all exterior doors leading to school buildings shall be locked during the school day. We do have events during the school day, so does anything with this make us have to do certain things or whatever? Like, let's say Veterans Day is one that I can think of where we have a ton of people the public attend during the school day. So what does this look like, or how does this apply, or what do we have to do anything different or special to be in compliance with this?
I may be wrong, and y'all are experts on attending events at the schools, but I can't think of one where we open doors besides the primary entrance.
It just said all exterior doors, so that's where it didn't say
Yeah, it
not
It says
primary.
access to school buildings is limited to the school's primary entrance during the school day.
Now at LES, we have a couple of entries because of where parking is. You can enter in the back or you can enter in the front, like for awards ceremonies.
Yeah, they do enter from the back at LES.
Because you have to park back there, otherwise you have to walk the long way.
Right. Well, that's what, and so it has the word
Till
"and,"
day.
so
Well,
that's what
I-
I was saying. I just want to make sure, like, any clarifications we might need, just so we're I want us to be in
But
compliance
if
with
we
the law.
have somebody posted at the door, that's the deal, that.
But
we
it
have-
did, again, it didn't say that, so I just want to make sure if we did that and we had somebody posted there and supervising the entrance, if that still means we're in compliance with the law. I'm not trying to change the law, I just want to make sure we're in compliance with the
I
law.
believe we would be if during those events that are a few times a year. We've got Veterans Day, we've got awards days, we've got things that my understanding with the law is that if you have somebody supervising that entrance,
Okay,
then you're covered.
okay.
Okay, but I thought there was some flexibility. I guess I'm questioning on where it says after school hours, if you had a policy, if there was the ability to be flexible, if you had a policy during this. Maybe misremembering it. I don't have it in front of me.
I'd have to double check that. I'd have to double check.
So, the law says, a public school operated by an LEA may unlock the door to the school building's primary entrance during a school-related event or activity if the door is continuously monitored by a school or LEA employee who is physically present at the door. To ensure access is limited to only authorized persons and to alert others if an unauthorized person enters.
That's during the school day or at all times?
This says outside of regular school hours.
The law, so it potentially is vague when it comes to during the school day?
Okay, there's another
Okay.
part.
Should say.
Each public school operated by an LEA shall ensure that all exterior doors leading into a school building are locked at all times and access to school buildings is limited to the school's primary entrance unless otherwise determined by school policy. So is
Was
that
that
the?
part, sorry, that part, was that could that be any time? Is that only after school or could that be any time?
It says it says to prevent unauthorized entry into the school building while students are present during the school day, as well as when students are present outside of regular school hours for school-related purposes or activities. So that seems to imply
There was a
that
spot that, yeah.
that's where we have the ability to make a school policy that we
Because
can.
you said as per, what was that phrase you mentioned? Per school policy?
Yes, it says unless otherwise determined by school policy.
Yeah, I think
Can I
we
make a
should-
recommendation?
Yes, I think the after.
I think it's a very simple recommendation. I think if you take off the words after school
That's
hours.
what I was getting at.
Well, you should have just done it. You would have, that's
She just
that's
wanna make sure
perfect.
the law-
Thank you for letting me do it.
Yeah.
No, I was trying to ask the question, should it only be after school? I know we're gonna do everything we can to be safe, have the doors locked, as much as humanly possible, but just in the event we have a large activity and we don't have, it's just too many people, like
I
Veterans
think
Day.
Ms. Child's amendment, where you strike after school hours,
Ms. Childs, what is your
I
amendment?
think that solves it, actually, when you read it.
Well, could it just say special events slash, since we like slashes, special events slash after school hours?
We're just getting rid of after school.
Well, but I
hours.
think
I-
we're saying when parents and members of the public are invited to attend events. I think that covers everything.
Ms. Childs,
Oh,
what's your
okay.
amendment?
So to remove the header altogether, is what you're saying? Okay.
What's your amendment? Are you
Yes,
amending?
yes, I will amend to remove the bolded letters after school hours.
Do we have a second?
Heading.
I'll second that.
We have,
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Keep the paragraph, just the heading that says after school hours.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that amendment?
Do we want to condition this upon a review from TSBA, just to make sure that we're in compliance with
Or at least
state
our
law?
lawyer, right?
I'm sorry, I meant our attorney. Our attorney, I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, I do recall, the reason I was asking the question, because we had discussions, because when we had concerns about this, the answer we were given was, there's a point in it that says, per your school board policy.
Just given the nature of the severity of, I mean, the importance and severity and everything that's gone through the state legislature, I'm fine with removal of after-school hours. I just would like to make sure that it complies with current state law as amended, and make sure the attorneys approved it.
Do you want me to read this one more time? Do you want to hear it one more time?
Condition it following, if there's an issue, we can bring it back up, but I'm willing to approve it as long as after-school hours does not get a conflict.
Madam Chair, if I could, I would suggest if we just go ahead and pass, I would suggest passing the policy as amended by Ms. Childs tonight. Ask Mr. Plumlee to review it and give us feedback so that we could amend the policy next month if we needed to.
That works better, because when I do what you're asking me to do, I usually will look at the state law, look at the policy, and then reconcile the two and make sure that what you guys want to do is good. Do hearing it and
It sounds,
in a meeting setting, I'd be happy to do that.
hearing it from her, and she's reading it, sounds like we're compliant. I just want the blessing.
Great, so we are on the,
I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say that when we send the policies for update to TSBA, they are reviewed by the TSBA attorney as well, and usually they will come back and say if there's something that,
So we have the school year starting soon, and
Right.
this is a very important policy to get approved.
right. So we're on the amendment at this point, just for everybody's clarity. I don't think we voted yet on the amendment. And so Ms. Childs and Mr. Burnett, we have a motion and a second.
No further discussion from me on the amendment.
All right, all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The amendment passes. We're now back on the main motion. So is there any discussion about approving the policy as amended, other than we would certainly like review to make sure it's legal?
Mr. Plumlee, do you want the number? Do you want the code?
TSBA, I mean the
The
TCA.
TCA, do you want the TCA?
Is it in the policy?
Yeah, I think it's in the policy.
Yeah,
The 496817?
it's
yes.
highlighted.
Yep,
That's
down at the bottom.
subsection 9.
Any more discussion on this item?
Thank you.
Hearing none, all in favor of approving the policy as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is approval of update to policy 4.204 summer instructional.
I
Oh,
did.
I'm so sorry. Did I skip
No,
one?
no, I made myself a note and I was, so on 3.204, the threat assessment team, that was a first reading. Is that correct? Did I read the notes correctly?
You did. That is first
Okay,
reading.
can we just make note to have that on the, if there's no objection, to have that on the consent agenda for next month? Is there any concern with that, or does that need to be,
I think because that's state law, we might, I mean, if you wanted to suspend the rules, you can approve it with one reading.
okay, then we need to go back to approve it, because we didn't suspend the rules before we did it.
Yes, you would have to.
Make a motion to bring that back up.
Okay, so we are going back to policy 3.204. I'll make a motion to suspend the rules and be able to approve policy 3.204.
So moved.
We have
Second.
a motion and a second. Any discussion on approving on a single reading? Hearing none, all in favor of approving 3.204 on a single reading, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Good
Next
catch,
item.
Madam Chair. That was a good catch.
Now we are on summer instructional programs. Sorry about that.
No, that's good. Summer instructional programs, this is two things. That's some updates from state law regarding the summer instructional programs that are now required based on the third grade retention law, which they have helpfully rebranded as the third grade promotion law, is what they call it now. But we have retention and promotion and makeup days. But it also, this was an appropriate time to cover our own summer programming that includes a regular summer school that was in existence before, which we had for the first time this past year, and just has a number of things for summer programming.
Any discussion on this item?
I do.
Yes.
So what grades is this for? Because at one point, you know, there was all these different, summer learning loss things, and it was really confusing. But then I know certain things they approved going forward, long term, but then some things they have ended. So it's clear as mud. But like, is this certain grades or is this any grade? I'm just a little confused.
It depends on which parts you're talking about. So a lot of it's very general. It's just talking. It talks about what's available to students. Traditional summer school is typically talking about high school.
Right.
Summer school, you know, kid might have failed a class and needs to make it up. The learning loss bridge camps, the after-school learning mini camps, and the summer learning camps are basically the ones that came about through state law. I think it covers it, that they're organized and operated in accordance with state law as well as the guidelines provided. And it is subject to change, as we found. Right now, it's for rising 3rd through 9th is what they're currently to fund. That doesn't mean that that's not indefinite.
And I mean, and I know we're a really small district, but if we needed to do, I know sometimes some school districts will offer like grade over promotion, like if a student needs to go from 6th to 8th grade because of their age, they might have some kind of summer school offered to do that. So, I mean, you know, if other things came up, it didn't necessarily have to be in this policy, or maybe we've got an as needed, or I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like that's covered under traditional summer
Okay.
school. I mean, I think that's a broad category that would allow, I would feel comfortable under that policy.
More discussion on this item?
I'm sure it was Vice Chair Burnett and myself probably. I'm just guessing.
That's pretty much your go-to, right?
You can pick the, you know,
So the information from TSBA said it expands the program to K through 3 and 9th. Does that sound right?
I didn't think it was K. Maybe I'm remembering that wrong. Maybe it was K this year. Sure,
So,
if that's
but-
what, I'm sure that's correct.
But
if
as
that's what
far
it
as the
says.
wording, like, it's state, I mean, like it
Yeah.
is, whatever
Well, I think
is
it-
required is required. Like, the
Right.
Department of Education, whatever is required
In
is
accordance with
required.
the guidelines,
But
yeah.
also, I think this was the summer they changed it like 4 times.
Yes, they
And
did.
so,
Yes.
Any more discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is approval of update to policy 4.300, extracurricular activities.
I'll make a motion to get this item on the floor. Is there a second?
second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Morrell?
Yes. This is some new law that basically says the board shall initially approve extracurricular activities at the district level to ensure proper support and supervision. That is new and has implications, obviously, for what we bring to the board. In the same way that we bring school fees to the board every year, we will now need to bring extracurricular activities to be approved at the district level.
Any discussion on this item? Yes.
Just a quick
And there's a
question for-
second part of, go ahead, yes.
So when you say initially, so past, we would need to this year approve every extracurricular activity, or our existing ones grandfathered in, and then would we, if we added water polo, we would only approve it the first time, but not every year after that?
I believe both of those to be true. I think the wise thing to do would be, at our next meeting, we get a list of all the extracurricular activities that are offered, make sure there's not anything that the board was not aware of or does not feel comfortable with, and we approve a big list the first time, and then we do them on a basis after that. But yes, but I would think that once it is approved, it's approved in perpetuity.
I have a request on that, because some of the clubs have like, you know, acronyms and things like that. Is it possible, and I'm sorry, because I know this is obviously a state law that requires extra work, but could we have, like, if it's an acronym, have it spelled out what it stands for, and then a blurb about, you know, what the club is, just like what grades and what the purpose is or something, because some of us are like, yeah, my kids did that, and others are like, I've never heard of that club. So that would be helpful, just kind of like with, we get for the books, like some kind of blurb so that we can, a little bit about.
I think we can do that for sure.
Thank you.
Any discussion, any more discussion? I would like to propose that we add, not necessarily approval, but just some kind of annual notice to the board of what they are, because not necessarily all of us will be sitting up here, and so, you know, for the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever, so to put it as an annual notice, there could be somebody new that comes up here that may not know, oh, here's the list of extracurricular, and they weren't here when it got approved and didn't go back and watch our board meeting minutes and saw where we approved it. So I think it would be just a notice to the board of here's what they are, if it's not one that needs to be approved, but just to, somewhere on the annual agenda, maybe.
If we could do that first meeting in August, I think that would be
Yeah. That would be great.
great.
So, the other issues at the bottom, were we gonna talk about that? The issue at the bottom where we're still gonna have to require a permission slip for a child to participate in anything?
In anything, yes.
I
anything.
thought we did that.
We did do that procedurally
We did do
already,
that.
but it was not at the time state law
Right.
Right.
or policy.
Yes, okay.
So does it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't say how they have to sign, like if they're doing like on Dragonfly, right? So they're doing the permission on there, then that could be sufficient. It doesn't say that it has to be a certain form or whatever. Am I following that correctly? That if they're signing a release or signing permission through like a
So-
Dragonfly, then it's,
Well, so I went to the Summer Law Institute last week, and the question was asked, is e-signature okay? And the answer was, we don't know. So, and the other question was asked, can we have a, long consent form that includes multiple activities? And the answer was, we don't know. So I think we're still waiting on guidance on
Yeah.
whether that's okay. I mean, everybody does e-signing now. There's contracts and everything is e-signed, but I think we do need some clarity on whether that would be acceptable.
Bought my last house by clicking.
I certainly,
Go ahead, I'm sorry, sir.
well, I'd say one thing we might want to explore is you can do a lot of this stuff through Skyward. I mean, you can have forms in Skyward that get pushed out automatically, and I think let Mr. Plumley discuss this, but I think you'd have a hard time arguing that if a parent who had a login on Skyward and digitally checked the box and hit approve, that wouldn't count as a signed and dated statement.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I also agree with what Chairman Harrison said, because, I mean, when I go in and fill out the very, very, very long forms for Dragonfly, I'm checking, my child can play this sport and this sport and this sport, and it has my login for Dragonfly. It's not his, it's mine as parent. So I do think if a club has a particular form set up like that, like a lot of I guess all the sports teams do, and then there may be other forms that other ones do. I don't know that they need an extra duplicate, but I know all of them don't, because I'm sure chess club, you would need something specific to some of the clubs like that.
I would tend to agree, and it says the superintendent shall develop administrative procedures outlining this
Yeah.
record-keeping process, so I will take those comments
Yeah.
to that process.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
thank you. Any more discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is approval of update to policy 4.600 grading system.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
I feel like we've seen this one somewhere
Yes,
before.
this has been a topic of conversation for a few months now.
This is
so-
another one that I think, based on last month's meeting, because we only had 3, it was determined to push this forward.
Or any discussion or updates? Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Royal and I talked earlier today about a couple of just housekeeping-related items for consistency in wording. And there's an example of page 6, we introduced the term EOC with no descriptor beforehand. A couple of times we say state mandated exams. Occasionally we say end-of-course exams. So Dr. Royal and I talked that think if we're comfortable as a board, he's gonna go through and just do some administrative corrections for wording for consistency and introducing words in terms the first time and using the same term throughout. Get that right?
Yes, and I think specifically, I think in most cases, we can say state mandated instead of EOC, for
Is there
example.
any, I mean, so I'll say this, a lot of the kids know it, or even parents know it as EOC. Is there a problem with putting state mandated exam parentheses EOC so that it's just clear?
Not at all.
Because, you know, a lot of people know it, or at least I know it as EOC. I mean, I know it's state mandated, but.
I think
Most-
clarifying it to state mandated would be, like Chris preferred folks who are not
Right.
in the weeds on this stuff.
Right.
State mandated exam / EOC if it's high
Or
school,
parentheses
or
whatever,
parentheses.
However you want to correctly do it.
Yeah,
Or
because it would
slash.
be state standardized assessments is how it is for 6 through 8, right? So we'll need to keep that for that language because they aren't EOCs there.
Just for clarity, because last time we just pushed it forward, but the time prior that we went over this, you know, we had a lot of discussion about what percentage the students' grades would be an exam. And so it looks like where it's landed right now that's before us is that for the students in grades 9 through 12, that the max potentially up to 2 exams. One's a semester and one's the EOC that's in April. The max that both of those exams together would be is 20%. Like, so whether they have 1 exam or they have 2 exams in the EOC classes, they would still, no matter what, 80% of their semester grade is going to be their coursework.
That was the result of, I think, some very good and
Okay.
thoughtful discussion by the board to make sure we're achieving the goals of the schools, the teacher of the schools, but also the intent of the state law.
Any more discussion on this item?
And just for the public to clarify, it is a big change because also students will not have the opportunity to be exempt in grades 9 through 11 for first semester.
Correct.
The
And do you want to
teacher-
speak, I guess, just a little bit to, like, why that change was requested?
Go into grading policy month 4. I will speak now.
Well, we have some students
No,
here and they weren't
absolutely.
here
No,
before.
it's a great question. The question has really been at issue, you know, both exams. We do exams or do we not do exams? Should exams be the default, or do we give students multiple opportunities to be exempt from exams? And maybe the bigger question is, are we doing the students a disservice if they potentially can go through the entirety of their high school careers without ever having taken an exam? That's really one of the questions that came up. And is there value in having students learn to prepare for rigorous end of semester exams? Are there assessment benefits of having students be accountable for rigorous end of assessment exams? And so based on a lot of conversation, we did a lot of comparison with other school systems, and we, very importantly, got the input of a number of teachers at Lakeland Prep to get their input. Feeling of many, and I'd say myself included, is that there is a benefit for students learning to take exams on a regular basis. And so should there be a requirement that students, you know, or should there be a portion of their academic career where students basically cannot be exempt, no matter how good your grades are or how good your attendance are? And so that's where we come up with the first semester exam, that basically everybody would take a first semester exam. In the second semester, the compromise was that students can be exempted from their second semester exams if they meet the academic and the attendance requirements. But complicating that was that there are state laws requiring that state standardized assessments, AKA state mandated exams, AKA EOCs, must be computed as part of the second semester average. And then the third layer of the conversation became, should we have second semester exams in courses where there are also state standardized assessments. And so the board compromise there was that students do have the option to be exempt from the second semester exam. All students in those classes that require them obviously must take the state standardized exams, but this policy contemplates the situation that was noted where in a worst case, the second semester combination of the teacher-made exam and the EOC exam would be 20% because the state mandated assessment must be 15%. And so that's basically the compromise that was reached. And I will say, speaking to the teachers and the administration again, they did believe that students who are in courses with EOC exams should also take a teacher-made semester exam because that exam would be 3 or 4 weeks after the EOC, gives additional opportunities for teachers to teach and for accountability on the part of the students and make sure that they are leaving the school year with that stuff fresh in their minds before that 2-month break, where we do know that learning loss can happen between the end of the year and the beginning. So it reduces that gap as well. So I think this was I commend the board. I think this is a really well thought out, as I said, and fair solution to the challenge. I did not say, however, that it will be popular with students to take the first semester exams, but
Well, and to be clear, this is a change because the ninth graders, this past year's ninth graders, got to be exempt fall and spring, and so this is a change. So when it comes up in December, graders will remember, well, I was exempt last, well, we don't have that
yeah,
that opportunity anymore.
clear and frequent communication are going to be very important on this
Yes,
policy,
yes.
for sure.
Discussion on this item? I would like to make a motion to amend. One thing that I saw in Germantown's policy was that courses that are only semester courses, you had the opportunity to be exempt the first semester if you were in 9th, 10th, 11th, or because the student doesn't control if they're assigned to it the first semester or the second semester. The school controls that, right? So if it's only a semester-long course like psychology or sociology, the student could be exempt if they were assigned to that course the first semester in addition to the students who potentially had it the second semester. So meaning it didn't give an added benefit if you were only assigned to it the second semester. Because like, let's say my student is assigned to it first semester, but Jeremy's student is assigned to it second semester, well, they can be exempt in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade if they have a 90, but my student who is assigned to it first semester can't be exempt because of the way this policy is written. So I can't remember the exact wording, but the essence of it was that if it was a semester course, meaning it was a half-credit course, that they could be exempt either semester in 9th, 10th, or 11th. So it didn't penalize certain students or I guess penalize is not the right word, but it didn't make some students take a semester exam where others didn't have to because of the semester the school assigned it to.
Well, this will be the first year we've had half-credit, we didn't have any last year, did we? Any half-credit courses in
think
high
so.
school? I think they were all
Right.
1 credit. So this will be the first year where that'll even be an issue.
Right.
So, Ms. Harrison, if I could, I would suggest on page 6, the last header says requirements for second semester exam exemptions in high school courses for all students. To amend that to say requirements for second semester exam exemptions, second semester or half-credit exams, something to that effect.
I
And
guess
then-
it would have to go
and
down
then
to the
in
say,
the,
because it talks second semester.
So this would incentivize taking, just go where, I mean, again, we've been talking about this for 4 months. We've been talking about this one for 4 minutes. So I just want to make sure
Yeah.
we know what we're doing here. Student who's looking at their elective schedule, they'd have the option potentially of taking a year-long elective class or 2 semester elective classes. The student that takes a year-long semester elective class has to take potentially 2 exams, be exempt from only one of them. The student that chooses to take 2 semester classes has the opportunity to be exempt from their first semester exam. It's the student that chose to take, so we're putting a priority in some way on semester classes. We're saying there are advantages to taking semester classes than there are to taking year-long classes. I guess that's the part
Yeah.
to me that doesn't,
Well, it does make sense to me that because the school assigns my kid to the first semester and Jeremy's kid to the second semester, my kid can't be exempt and Jeremy's can.
But he's probably got another class second semester, right, that he can be exempt from.
Yes, yes.
So, I mean,
guess
it's
so,
luck of
maybe.
the draw.
Unless
I
it's
mean,
study hall or something. It could be could be
Sure.
study hall.
Sure.
So that was a difference in Germantown's policy that I found that they weren't, I guess, they made it where you could be eligible for the exemption. If you took a half credit course, because you didn't know if the student was gonna be in study hall, at whatever, guidance office, whatever it was. And I had when I went to the Germantown School Board meeting, I was kind of asking all those probing questions as to why they did it. And it was because you didn't know when your student was going to be assigned to the course, and you didn't know what their other course was going to be, whether it was going to be work study, or whether it was going to be study hall, or whether it was actually going to be a course.
It would be a teacher-made though, because we don't have any EOCs for half credits,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
Not that I can think of.
I think so, EOCs.
I don't know if
So-
personal finance doesn't have it, because that's a required state one.
No.
Yeah,
I think that's accurate. No, I don't think they're in
US
EOCs.
government, no, it
So
doesn't.
we're talking about teacher-made
Right.
exams
Right.
exclusively
Right.
for half-credit courses, yeah.
Yes, the reason I like Ms. Harrison's comment is I struggled with the first semester, eliminating the first semester exemption originally, but bought into it because it was the subject. And Ms. Harrison's follows the same logic. I now get the opportunity to be exempt from the exam for the subject. I'm only taking one semester, but it's still a subject. Don't have that opportunity, again, to your point, if I end up taking econ in the fall and
Study
personal
hall.
finance in the spring.
Right.
But my friend takes econ in the spring and personal finance in the fall, vice versa, however, you know what I mean. Then one of us got to take it regardless, and one of us had the opportunity to be exempt.
I think what we're saying is that any student in any semester course is eligible for exam exemption. That's the
how their
bottom line.
policy- I believe that's how their policy. And the other thing that I will say is, I sent everybody, or I sent it to Dr. Horn, Dr. Horst, and everybody, all the policies from all the school districts. This one most closely aligns with Germantown, so that's why I really got interested in their policy, and kind of looked at each little nuance with it. And that was one of the nuances where ours was different, and that's why I asked them the question about why they had done it. And I will say, just part of my good discussion with them was teacher-made exam doesn't necessarily mean you're sitting in there filling in a bubble form, or you're filling in a 20-question test. One of the board members was telling me, like, her student actually had to do a PowerPoint and do a presentation. That was their exam. And it was the student had the development, the teacher used the development to have it for public speaking. And that was actually what the teacher used it for. It was a teacher-made exam. That was the teacher development, but it wasn't just sitting there writing a test. So just for clarity, teacher-made exam doesn't necessarily mean you're sitting taking a 20-question test or a 50-question test. It is within the scope of the teacher to have other things that aren't just sitting and writing and taking a time test within the hour. So that was a positive thing in my discussion with Germantown as to what a teacher-made exam looks like.
Well, and it's also not talking about, mass exemption. You gotta have 90, first of all, to be exempt. So you would have to earn your way to that exemption for that half credit course. And then the attendance component as well. So if you have a half credit course in the fall and you pair it with semester of study hall, then you have potential for exemption, and then of course no exam here because it's study hall. Or you have half credit, and you get exempt from both of them because you reach 90 for both of them and you have your attendance in order.
So, just for clarity too, for ambitious students, they can also put a lot of classes their senior year because they are exempt. They have the opportunity to be exempt first and second semester of their senior year. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about the semester course because, yeah, I mean, it's true. It is luck of the draw. Just like, honestly, signing up for some of your classes, you know, you've got to put your choices, and you may, I mean, my daughter numerous times has put, you know, classes she didn't necessarily get, and some of them were, you know, choice one was 2 semester, you know, classes, and then the second choice was a year long, and the third was a 2 semester classes. So, I mean, you sign up and you don't always exactly know what it's going to look like, nor do you know which semester you're going to get, you know, assigned it. But it does feel like, you know, it does feel a little unfair to the students that pick a year-long class that they don't have the opportunity to be exempt, but a student picking semester, because again, they would still have the chance to get exempt the second semester. But again, if they don't take study hall, they don't even have to do any work anyway, so they're still not taking an exam. And, you know, I would hate for students to pick classes based on something like this, and we all know the, you know, full of unintended consequences. There will certainly be students that go, you know, pick semester classes just because we made kind of an odd policy about it. So I don't know. I just, I mean, my daughter actually loves humanities, so she's actually probably taken more semester classes than most people. So I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that.
Way that we can add a separate policy just for the semester. This is in this, move this policy along.
Oh, and I guess my suggestion might be, because of the timing, I think we'll have the opportunity to pass this, you know, basically before it really becomes too relevant. I mean, that first 2 weeks of school. No one's going to be upset if, I think the only option is that, what sounds like the board may offer the opportunity to be exempt from all semester-long course exams. I think if you did that the first weeks of school, at worst, they would be celebrating by some students. It wouldn't cause a problem. We certainly need to get these things tied up now. I'd ideally like to, just because of what we've seen with all the language and the specifics and the clarity, and
Yes.
I'd love to take this back to the leadership team at the high school and say, this is the direction I think the board is going, or at least that they're considering. What would it look like if we brought that back? I think at your direction, be to take it back to them and let them wordsmith it, make sure we're not missing things, because we've certainly missed some things on our end. This has been a process, as we've said.
Could you have them, they're sort of a projection of what sorts of half credit you think they might offer in the
Sure,
next
yeah,
couple-
I think they have a good handle on that.
It would be good to know how this is and how many potential kids it would affect in terms of how many would take those half credit courses.
Is there gonna be ample testing in order to justify that they've properly vetted for that class? Be factored into this, so.
Well,
I
and,
thought- go ahead.
go ahead, Nico.
I was just gonna say, the way the policy's written, I'm fine with the, you know, administrative changes that we were discussing earlier, but this obviously raises a question from a half credit standpoint.
Every year, they have to take math, English, science, 3 years of social studies. So it's not like they won't be exposed to what it's like to, you know, take a semester exam in those other courses.
Yeah,
So
I don't have any objection to that, the board going that direction. My main concern right now is, are we gonna be able to craft it, I guess, where we've
I'm
kind of nailed it
comfortable with-
here. Real time, yeah.
So what I think I hear is that the board, so not make amendments to the policy, be able to discuss with the leadership team to make sure we aren't missing something if we were to bring that back. And so discuss the policy, review the policy as presented other than the administrative changes. And then go forward with a vote on that tonight, whether the board approves or not, but let the board vote to approve or not. And then you will take the question about the half credit, what it looks like, potential implications, things we might not be thinking of right here, right now, to make sure that we aren't missing something, or there is not some other feedback that we need, or some other consideration that we need before we consider that. And then this will be, whatever form it comes out tonight, will be on our August agenda as well, if there's potential changes, or potential to consider the half credit courses.
Yes, so basically, it would come back to you in August. Without the deletions and the
Without the yellow,
highlights, the
okay.
only thing that would be highlighted would be additional language regarding semester classes.
Yeah, and I really want to know what they think too. I'd love to know what Ms. Martin and her team think about it.
Want to just change the monitoring to frequency to monthly?
Yes.
Just curious.
Yes.
I feel
We're
like this
gonna
is
just-
all
yeah.
going
So,
on and on.
all in favor of approving the policy 4.600 with only the clerical correction, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes, and we will also have this item potentially on our next month's agenda.
Of course.
Next item.
Yes,
You ready for the next item? Next item is policy 5.106, application and employment.
I'll make a motion to get this item on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Go ahead, Dr.
I just
Hall.
got a network failure here.
I know, I'm struggling. Getting sometimes errors and sometimes not.
Spinning circle of death.
It's been frustrating.
Let me see, okay, it came back up. Scroll down to item,
Live stream still working?
I just checked and it appeared to be. It says excellent clin action, so. Okay, application and employment.
Yes, sir.
Changes to TCA, I do see that, and it's talking about the
Yeah.
Department of Children's Services
Oh,
or
this
similar.
one's-
So it's basically expanding the children's services
Just vote on it, you can't do
definition.
anything about it.
State law.
Okay,
Yeah, so it's,
Consent agenda.
so it's basically
It's basically a child
expanding
abuse
the,
registry.
It's more
expansion.
protections for,
Yeah.
for the kids.
it's basically saying who can't be employed,
Right.
expanding the broadness of it, I guess, or
Make a
the,
motion to approve.
we have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Are you back with us yet?
I'm there, yeah.
Okay.
Next item, thank you, is approval of updated policy 5.119, employment of retirees.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
We have a motion, is there a second? Second.
These are general changes to state law discussing the circumstances under which retirees can be employed.
Any discussion on this item? I don't see any significant changes to time or anything
No,
like that.
it's
Nope.
fine.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on update to policy 5.305, family and medical leave.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Sorry.
Between those two, no, you're fine.
I just want to make a comment on it.
Yes.
I actually think this is a very positive thing that the state is paying for teachers to be able to have 6 weeks of paid leave, in addition to any other leave that they would have. This is a new funding for that.
It's maternity and paternity.
Correct.
Which is great, yeah.
Is this funded through is it I can't say it, TISA? Is it
We
funded
pay
through?
up front and get reimbursed by the state.
That's correct, and this, I don't think, no, I think this is outside of TISA, it's not part of our TISA calculation.
Okay, so, but this comes through a funding mechanism. This isn't, I guess I'm asking, is this an unfunded mandate? Not that it's a bad mandate, but is this an unfunded?
No, it's a funded mandate.
It's funded,
Okay.
It's
yeah.
funded,
Is that accurate?
yeah.
And it's,
We have no idea how we're gonna get reimbursement.
I know teachers are counted as state employees, and it's a new, basically, they said they had more money, extra money, and so they funded all state employees, including teachers, to get 6 weeks of paternity and maternity leave. Very surprising.
yeah, and they said it's licensed, so if you have a license to work in the school, so it's psychologists and, nurses, yeah, so it's, and if you have to have a license to hold your job, then it applies.
But I will note, ours applies to all.
Yeah,
No.
so this is broader
okay,
than state
okay.
law?
No, we do not. Sorry.
Where's, well, I'm saying.
Sorry, it
for
says
eligible-
eligible employees, based on state law. Thank you.
And
So
it,
it's not all.
but it doesn't pay for subs, so we would have to pay for subs.
That part is an unfunded mandate?
Yeah.
Of course, there had to be one of those in there.
Subs.
So does it I was trying to see in here, does it define an eligible employee, or the eligible employee is?
Teachers, principals, supervisors, or other individuals required by law. It's down in number 4. Have to hold a valid license of qualification for employment.
Oh, I
You
was up
see
at
it
the
down
top
there?
for the policy. My apologies. I was up at the top. Okay, I'm there with you now. Okay.
It also says that they can take it in pieces, so they can take you don't have to take the whole 6 weeks once.
It's a state.
State law. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is approval of update to policy 5.307, physical assault leave.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second? I'll second.
Also state law.
Any discussion on this item?
We don't have to use it.
To Laura's question, is there a funding source for this? Okay. I'll echo what. you
Keith.
say.
All in favor of
Mr.
approving
Acton.
5.307, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is approval of update to policy 5.600, staff rights and responsibilities.
I'll make a motion to get this item on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Harrell?
Yes, these are, again, some changes in state law. There was an amendment that Mr. Burnett and I discussed that I think was a good suggestion that he had.
I'd make a motion to move under educators have the right to, item under number 9, report students who commit offenses. I'd like to move that item number 9 to the next page. Each staff member has the responsibility to. Reporting,
So do you mean, so duplicate it, or?
just move it,
Move
delete
it.
it, delete it from one, add it to the other.
That should be a responsibility.
Yes, we're gonna, the amendment was,
To move number
Remove
9
number-
to
go ahead.
under, is that right? Move number 9 to under okay, am I saying that right? Under page 2, the responsibility section.
Move number 9 that's under the educators have a right to. Remove
report
that.
students who commit offenses of assault and battery or vandalism.
Make it
Yes.
7
That
under
section should
responsibilities.
become 7 down under responsibilities.
Any discussion on we have an amendment, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second for amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The amendment passes. We're now back on the main motion. Any discussion on the policy as amended? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the policy as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is approval of update to policy 6.200, attendance.
I'll make a motion to get this item on the floor. Is there a second? We have a second by Mr. Acton. Dr. Horrell?
Yeah, this one does take just a little explaining. It contemplates a release time course. A release time course is specifically defined in TCA as a course in religious moral instruction. And the actual change that kind of triggered this change to policy was that you only used to be allowed to do it for half an elective credit at max, but now you can do it for 1 elective credit. But a board does not have to approve any elective credit for this. Now, let me say again, these are only specific courses in religious moral instruction. And kind of what the law contemplates is that you have a student that has the time in their schedule to either come in late or leave early and go to a course that could be at a church or a synagogue or a mosque or any place, I guess, that's giving religious moral instruction, that they be allowed to do that under state law, under the attendance law. Now, the board has the option of saying, and in addition, we will give you credits of that. It used to be the law said that you could say, we will give you up to a half credit. Now the law says we will give you up to 1 credit. My recommendation to this board is that we not grant credits under this circumstances. I think it would be very difficult to evaluate and ascertain. I certainly support students being able to pursue these courses. I think that part of the law makes perfect sense to me. There's no issues there. But I think once we get into actually giving Carnegie credits for these types of courses, I think we're going to kind of wind up with some sticky wickets. So my recommendation would be to cut basically that orange part and approve the policy without it.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry.
I was just going to say, I agree, and I was going to recommend that we amend this to remove what is shown as the orange part on my end. That says include the following language and goes from there.
An amendment?
Second that.
We have a motion and a second to amend to remove the section in orange. Any discussion? None. All in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The amendment passes. We're back on the main policy. Any discussion on the main policy?
So what you said earlier, basically this is doable under a set of circumstances because there's not time to leave in the middle of the day and leave and go and come back in a 50-minute, 55-minute environment, right?
Right.
So it would have to be first period or last period.
And I should say
then-
that's me speculating. I guess theoretically you could have, depending on where it was set up, if there was a new building that opened, it does require that the student has to provide their own transportation.
Right.
If somebody started, I'm just using an example, if somebody started offering these courses at Lakeland Town Square, where you could get there in 3 minutes and get back, and maybe the instruction's only 20 minutes, theoretically, maybe you could get there and back in 50 minutes and pull it off. So I don't want to suggest that it would be limited, but those are the kind of circumstances that I would think of, that you might have a morning study or an afternoon of some sort.
And they can't miss one of their classes to go do this instead.
Correct.
It has to
Yeah.
be during an empty
Yeah.
period, okay.
Just reading, students shall not be excused during any class which requires an examination for state or federal accountability purposes. So could they technically be excused during an elective course? Or does it have to be during a study hall? Because the only ones that are state or federal would be science, math, the ones, I guess the graduation ones I'll say, or whatever. The others are just electives. Is that accurate? So they could, we're taking weightlifting and it was during weightlifting class, it'd be something that, because I don't think is that one that requires an examination for state or federal accountability purposes? As an example, is weightlifting, I don't know.
I took it as they would have to have a period scheduled off, right?
That's how I took it, that basically if your schedule stacked up and you didn't have any periods that, were.
What does release time course mean? Does that mean the whole semester or just for like 5 weeks?
It's up to one class period per school day. Again, if you're going class period per school day, you're not taking.
I mean, it's state law, and certainly we have to approve it, but I would like, can y'all get clarification on what requires an examination for state or federal accountability purposes? Because to me, from examination from a state standpoint, like, not all courses have an EOC, or they don't have a required exam, so what does federal accountability purposes mean? If not, then during weightlifting, it sounds like they could potentially leave and miss that class the way I'm reading it. So I just would like clarification on that. So I'm not
got it.
saying we need to amend the policy at all. I would just like
What does the
some.
state law require?
This is pretty much word for word the state law. The only thing that I didn't see when I AB'd them myself was I couldn't see where it was specific to a course in religious moral instruction. So I emailed Jennifer White with TSBA, and she pointed me to something that I had missed where it defines what a release time course is. And a release time course is defined as a course in religious moral instruction. So she pointed that out to me. This is pretty much word for word what the state law is. Now we can certainly try to clarify means.
I just don't, yeah.
I apologize,
No.
and where I'm going with that is, how do we know they're going from the school to point of wherever?
How do we know they're doing
How do we
that?
know they're going to where they say they're going?
I don't, because we have a written consent form signed by the parent, I guess. I mean, it's this is, I believe, this is a law that was requested probably to some legislators, and
Just foresee so many liabilities with this and just open-ended issues that could occur. I would just, what happens if somebody has a wreck from, I know there's a release, but how do we know they're getting from the school to the location?
and I feel like it says the district shall not be responsible for transporting students. I think that's a policy that
Duly noted.
takes some liability off of us. It says the student shall provide documentation to the principal designee as proof of the student's participation. I know we don't have the option of if a student says, I'd like to go take this course in religious moral instruction during this free period, we're obviously,
Understood.
gonna say yes. I think to Ms. Harrison's question, do we have to approve it? Can we only approve it during study hall? Can they miss as many civics? I mean, I think what you're asking is, can you sign up for civics and instead go every day to a course in religious
Right.
moral instruction?
That's what I'm kind of
Yeah,
asking,
I
yes.
think no.
I don't know,
and
but
the
if you
logic
read
to
it-
me
The way I
says
read
no,
it, I
but-
agree with Ms. Harrison, yes, they could.
I mean, that's what, it just, the language
Yeah.
is not real clear.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily have it doesn't have a state mandated course, so the way.
It's what we call in the business a bad law.
Yes.
It is
Needs some
not clear.
clarification.
But, and it does say the principal doesn't even may. So I'm just reading this out loud. I'm struggling with.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree
I-
with your liability concern.
But it also says the student would be responsible for any missed schoolwork. It really is vague if it's supposed to be, you're allowed to like miss, third period because it's not a state mandated test, or it needs to be your third period because you
Right.
could earn a credit. It sounds like it could be either one.
Right.
It sounds like it's left vague enough, it could be either one.
We have amended this.
Yeah, so
No.
we're at the point where we're only without the orange section. So we're permitting it as required by state law, but we're not allowing credit for it.
I will ask Jennifer White or work with Mr. Plumley to get some additional clarification on the types of, circumstances where students are allowed to miss.
All right, so any more discussion on this item?
Dr. Earl, does this need to be approved this evening?
This is one where it is state law, so if the board didn't approve this policy and on
We
the
still have to
first
comply.
day of school, a student
Right.
came and said, I'm requesting to miss for this release time course, I would say, here's the form you need to fill out, and you're responsible for your own transportation, and, again, it's the law. Now, I will say theoretically, that could have happened last year, and it never did. It was the law last year. It was a law we were not aware of because it had not popped up in our review.
The code may be wrong, because I was trying to look it up for clarification. I don't think it's 3019.
It's not. From what I'm reading, it's that the student has to be given credit as if they, attended the school. So I do think, we'd need, it'd be procedural, but some kind of, something where an instructor would have to sign off, each time they go, so that we know that they're not just, truant from the school day. So even if they're not getting the credit, because if you're getting the credit, it says you'd have to get some kind of transcript from that entity. But since they're going to be given an attendance credit, for that period, I do think there would need to be some kind of procedure where they would have to bring something back each week. Otherwise, they are truant. But it sounds like it's vague, where they could either have a whole period set aside, I guess that could be a thing, or it could be, I'm going to do this 5-week course and miss, a class each week that doesn't have a state mandated test.
More discussion on this item?
No.
Hearing none, all in favor of approving policy 6.200 as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is approval of update to policy 6.202, homeschools.
Make a motion to get this item on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell?
This one has a couple of changes. One, it talks about, it replaces GED or high set with high school equivalency credential.
Removal of the vaccination
Yes, thank you.
requirement.
Yep.
And just for clarification, I assume when this is updated, the numbering will be fixed, like, because we're removing, okay.
Yep.
Just for clarification. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is approval of update to policy 6.309, zero tolerance offenses.
Make a motion to get this on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Yes, basically, this was kind of a rewrite because, for both clarification and to get closer to the model policy and to bring it in line with our discipline policy. I think the rewrite is clearer. But the one that got added to the zero tolerance, the state required zero tolerance offenses, is threats of mass violence on school property or at a school-related activity, essentially.
Any discussion on this item?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
One of the items that's being deleted and not replaced on here is electronic threats. Dr. Horl and I talked about this earlier today, and it's not gonna be on this one, but when we move to disciplinary procedures, I'm gonna ask that we add electronic threats to level 4, since we're not gonna have it in our zero tolerance offenses anymore.
Discussion?
On number 2, unlawful possession of any drug, including any controlled substance, that says at a school-sponsored event. Number 5 says a school-related activity, and I realize they're different things, but I know we have groups that do things that aren't school-sponsored, but they are related to the school. So in one of those instances, like a trip, for example, would this policy apply in those school-related activities? And if so, do we need to change language? Or is it because this is the state's language?
This is the state's language. Now, was the question, were you talking about 2 or 5 when you said a
So,
school trip, for
Well,
example?
the difference is 2 is school-sponsored, 5 is school-related. And I realize they're different offenses, but can we expand number 2 to include related?
There, 2 is part of annotate, like, footnote 3, 5 is part of the annotate, and footnote 6, so two different annotations.
Yeah, so 6 is because they just added threats of mass
Offense.
violence as a zero
That's right.
tolerance.
I'm kind of with Ms. Thomas on this, because in my mind, school-related activities is the whole thing. And then school-sponsored is a smaller subset, slightly smaller, but still smaller, and I'd rather be inclusive of all, unless Dr. Hall thinks that would put us at risk.
Example that comes to mind is one of the school support organizations that sponsors a dance. If someone took, some kind of drug or whatever, or controlled substance, would that be covered as a zero tolerance because it says school-sponsored and the school isn't the one putting on the dance? There's a school support organization putting on the dance, but not the school itself. So would that be able to be considered still a zero tolerance situation, or do we need to amend the language to have it broader where it says, where it covers an activity like that by a school support organization?
My mind, it's covered as a school-sponsored event, and that we're using school-sponsored differently in that case. And then we're talking about, when we say it's school-sponsored, we're talking about who's organizing it and who's funding it and those kind of things. I don't believe that's the intent of the law, but,
Well, until I
Check
see
it
that-
out.
I see what you guys are saying, I'm just trying to understand where they would differ.
For example, the DC trip is always called, they're very clear, it is not a school-sponsored
That-
trip.
that one I would categorize differently than the
School
the
support
dance that you're talking about was signed off on by the principal, it was given permission, they have the right to do that because the board gives permission to oversee, you know, that school-sponsored organization, that school support organization. Now, I'm fake lawyering here, but to me, that would clearly, if you went to that dance that was sponsored by the PTO and you showed up and you had been using illegal drugs, I would have no issue saying you are suspended for 180 days because you brought drugs or used drugs at this party. I will say the DC trip under Lakeland School System policy says this is clearly not, we're making clear, this is not school-sponsored. You can't use school resources. You're on your own. There are specific rules that govern that. If you went to the DC trip and possessed or were under the influence of illegal drugs, say we'd probably be on shakier ground there.
There's the Spain trip and the Paris
Costa
trip.
Rica and Paris,
Yeah,
yeah,
or
that's what I was
whatever.
Those are
wondering.
not school-sponsored trips.
Right.
But they would follow under school-related.
For a threat of mass violence, yes.
I'd need to get an opinion on that one.
Well, and
I feel very, very good about, I would recommend suspension at any of these, PTA-sponsored or, football booster-sponsored activities. To me, those are school-sponsored activities for the purposes of this.
So could we consider a similar approach, potentially consider passing this one as presented tonight?
Right.
And then have it on the agenda for next month
Yeah.
with an opinion on adding that to item 2?
well, and the threat of mass violence is on school property or at a school-related activity, so the language is not really the same. I don't want there to be a room right there, because they're still representing our school. They're with faculty who've taken their time to take them these places, and I want them to have the assurance that we've got it covered. So,
I also have another question. Like on number 4, when it specifically lists these individuals, school employees, basically. I assume there's still, flexibility, because in another role I had a student at a different district who got a 180-day suspension for assaulting a parent on school grounds. Just asking, because in the event that,
So are you asking, can it be beyond those?
Yeah, I'm
lists?
just
Is that list
asking-
all inclusive? Or
That'd
can
be
it
is that
aggravated
criminal?
assault.
That's criminal
Well,
at
you-
that
you
point.
got-
well,
number
but
3 is
the
aggravated
student,
assault.
that's up to the individual if they file charges, and the individual did not file charges, but the district did not care either way. They saw it was on cameras, they had evidence, so the student got 180 days for assaulting an adult parent that was out of school. So I'm just asking, I don't know if that would fall under the,
I think we'd be litigating some more charge there, non-employee.
But, so, the zero tolerance offenses are the state zero tolerance offenses. So what that is saying is that you don't have a choice
right,
if one of these things happen. It doesn't matter what you think of the kid or the circumstance, if
Right.
you believe that this is what happens, possession of a firearm, unlawful possession of drugs, aggravated assault, which if you attacked a parent,
It depends on if they press
Okay.
charges, I believe.
I'll say this, that doesn't mean that's the only reason you can suspend a student for 180 days.
Right.
You can
I
suspend a
think that's
student
the-
for 180 days for things beyond that. It's just saying there is no discretion in these. So in our situation, I think if we had a student that assaulted a parent, I'd probably recommend 180 days also.
so
But-
that would probably fall under the next policy we're gonna talk about.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify
Yeah.
on how that worked, because I know that's a serious offense if you assault anybody, so I just, so anyway, just wanted to ask.
Any more discussion on this policy? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is approval of update to policy 6.313, discipline procedures.
I'll make a motion to get this item on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell, you want to introduce? And I know, Jeremy, you have a discussion item on this.
Yes, so this adds, under state law, under level 4, threat of mass violence on school property or at a school-related activity, which is required to be added per state law. That's essentially the update there.
Mr. Burnett, you had an item
That's right.
that you'd like to.
Thank you, ma'am. I would like to make a motion to amend and insert under level 4, electronic threats.
Jeremy has a motion to add electronic threats under the listing that is not an inclusive listing for level 4. Is there a second? Second. Any electronic threat?
Would we, is it just a threat?
Well, and let me,
Oh, and
Jeremy, I know we talked about this earlier, but as I'm looking at this, what I want to point out is that level 4 basically says it will be expulsion, which is 10 days or more. It's not an automatic 180 days, but its expulsion is 10 days or more. Level 3, as you can go anywhere from in-school suspension to expulsion. They're the greatest range of any of them, 3. So I guess I would suggest electronic threat mean a number of things. If you text somebody, I'm gonna beat you up.
yeah. So I'll amend my motion, if that's okay, as a friendly amendment to have it under level 3.
Just a point of clarification, so you had an amendment earlier, I seconded. So we need to vote on that amendment, or are we allowed to modify that amendment here?
Just withdraw it. Can that happen?
One under the friendly amendment, so I'll withdraw that motion and make a secondary motion to add, insert electronic threats under level 3.
A second to adding it to level 3.
Well,
Second.
so the electronic threat of mass violence. I
me,
think a
that would
threat is a
autom-
threat.
Sorry.
I think a threat is a threat.
Well, no, level 3 already says threats to others. We could put parenthetically including electronic threats under level 3, but I think to Ms. Thomas, I think if it is a threat of mass violence, it's not just a threat, it's a different category. I think a threat of mass violence is,
Whether it's electronic or however it is, it's,
Right.
Right.
it's,
Yeah.
it's a mess. So we're on the amendment to add electronic threats to level 3. Any more discussion on that item?
Words here, would we want to add threats to others? These to include verbal, written, electronic? I'll leave it out.
Other, just other, ETC? 'Cause
I'd
I
love to
just-
say other, I'm worried that vagueness
I would
needs to
say
be
including but
specified.
not limited to in verbal or electronic.
Escalate threats to others without
Written.
Yep.
any threats to others. Or trying to define it.
Lock yourself in.
Whereas if it's just threats to others, text, if it's face-to-face.
More discussion?
Still an amendment?
Yes, we're on the amendment.
I would like to continue to have that. Because it was in our zero tolerance, there was a reason it was there. Previous members of the board, maybe Ms. Harrison may remember why it was added to be included there as a zero tolerance offense. I mean, current policy says containing a credible threat to cause bodily injury or death to another student or school employee. The transmission of such a threat creates actual disruptive activity at the school that requires administrative intervention. I think that's significant enough to warrant making sure we don't lose mention of that in policy.
I would, just thinking out loud, electronic threats could cross over so many lines from just a simple great threats, but I mean, just from a lesser level to a higher level. And I think what you'd have to do is go into each one of these levels and start specifying the electric threat and how it applies to that level. Whereas hearing from Mr. Plumley what I did, you have the threats to others under the level 3. Give me, I'm just peeking into level 2 just to see if there's anything that would. That's where I'm going with this. I feel like we may have it broadly defined in the current policy to cover us. I can be convinced that electronic needs to be included. I just not sure I have it all worked out in my mind yet on where that should be.
So, way back, there was a discussion, and it was way, way back. I think it was with the first board that was sitting up here. And it was a threat against a local high school or made electronically at a local high school, something about an online kind of thing. There was, and that's where it kind of came about, was there was, and so it was actually more like this threat of mass violence. It was, one of those situations, but it was an electronic version of mass violence. I think it was circulating on Snapchat or one of the kids' social media. I mean, it was a really, really long time ago. And we had an in-depth discussion about how to address it and make sure that we are crystal clear that any kind of whatever on that, that was gonna scare a school and because essentially that's what it was, shut a school down kind of situation, or make kids scared to go to school. That was kind of the impetus for the electronic threat, because it was brand new too, that kids were on Snapchat and that kind of stuff. So that's where the way back, where kind of the history of it. But I do kind of understand what Mr. Plumley is saying, that the way it's worded here, the threat of mass violence on school property or at a school-related activity. The only question I have about that is threat of mass violence on school property, but it's not saying that the threat has to
Say the
occur
source.
on school.
right.
Mass violence has to occur.
Okay, I'm just,
Right.
not the
Yes.
threat doesn't have to occur, the threat can occur anywhere, but it's that the event would take place on school property or school-related activity. More discussion on we're at the amendment to level 3, adding electronic threat.
And I'll go with Chair Harrison's memory of why it was added before, and knowing that we have it in 3 and 4. And thinking further on Mr. Plumlee's suggestion, I'd like to withdraw the amendment.
Any objection or discussion to that? Hearing none, we're back on the main motion. 313 as presented. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is, I apologize, I got off. Next item is approval of update to policy 6.319, alternative education.
I'll make a motion to get this item on the floor. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell?
Yes, this is the one that adds sending the student to that location would endanger the safety of the students. Okay, this is when you can not assign a student to the alternative school or program. If assigning that student to that location would endanger the safety of the students or staff. We already have the option of assigning students electronically to alternative school or remotely. So this is really something that's already in place.
There was a pretty big discussion on this, because they actually had this the night I was at the Germantown board meeting, and there was a lot of discussion about how this was a change to alternative school, and it had to do with some of the school threats and things like that, and this was to make students and staff feel safer, because there are, just to give history on it, there's alternative schools certainly for certain things that you can have alternative school at your school, but it was where there's a situation where people had been threatened or there was some situation. So it's meant, or the intent is to make students and staff feel safer.
Yes, and we're already procedurally doing that essentially, because of the flexibility that's offered by the remote alternative school law that was passed previous years. But I mean, this clarifies even more.
Discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item,
If
Sorry,
I could, just
Mr.
one
Burnett.
follow-up comment.
Yes.
Dr. Rowland also noticed that added 10, so 6 through 10 at the beginning of the policy. Are there other policies that we need to update to include 6 through 10? I think we did several last year too, right? Where we added 9.
I
Have a review and just kind of spot check and see if we see any, or maybe the
yeah, I
policy
don't, the
committee
policy
could-
committee, I would
Yeah, can y'all,
think.
Yeah, we'll
Like-
catch them as we go.
Yeah.
so we are on 60001.
That's it.
I'll make a motion to get this item on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell?
Yes. This is another one that talks about parental permission to do things. This is talking about surveys, analysis, or evaluations that they can only be administered to students under the age of 18. The parents or guardians have provided written, informed, and voluntarily, signed consent. If you're 18 years or older, you can participate on your own consent. And then it adds some language about guardians, where it previously just said parents.
Discussion on this item?
This is the change to opt-in. It's changed opt-outs to opt-ins.
Yes, almost across the board,
Almost
yeah.
across the board,
It's a
except
theme.
for family life and health screening. Those are still opt-out.
Right.
But all this other stuff is, now you have to opt-in,
Yep.
opt into it. For work for our people.
Any more discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is approval of update to policy 6.402, physical examinations and
A motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a
Second.
second? We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell?
Yes, this is similar, at least in part, to the last, in terms of talking about parental permission. This one, as Ms. Thomas said, parents, guardians can excuse their students participating in health screenings by submitting a request. So that is an opt-out, as she noted. There's also a change. Students will not be permitted to enroll or attend school without proof of immunization. And really some updates to clarify language and in some cases simplify language.
It's saying they can opt out of a physical exam before participating in a strenuous athletic event or team. No, I mean, I'm just asking, is it saying that they don't have to do the exam now?
No, it's talking
No.
about the screenings,
screenings.
the health screenings
Yeah.
in school.
Where they do the blood pressure.
Oh, so you still have to have a physical to do an
Oh, yeah.
athletic?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
This is about the groups that come in to do your vision,
Okay.
whatnot, yeah.
okay.
More discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is approval of policy 6.4052, opioid antagonist. This is a first reading.
Is this one where we need to make a motion to suspend? It is state law, right? Or no, this
No.
is state.
No,
Board of
it's not.
Education.
It was by my request.
Okay. Is this something we would want to suspend the rules or have two readings?
I would request suspending the rules on this
Well, I'll
one.
make a motion to suspend the rules and have one reading for the adoption of this policy. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any objection to suspending the rules to only have one reading?
I'd like to review the policy before I make that.
So the motion currently is to suspend the reading and have, suspend the rules and have one reading. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have, I think I counted, was it 4 yes and 1 no? So the motion passes.
Madam Chair, if I could,
yes.
could we take a 2-minute break?
Certainly we can. Any objection to the rest of the board? All right, we will go in recess for 2 minutes. or 3 minutes, or however long you need, Mr. Burnett.
Thank you.
There's one more. I know you're hungry. There's one more.
Had meetings that were long.
Yes.
We've had meetings that were too.
Seen
You
a
chose
lot.
the meeting. Most out of it, and I respect you for that. Very long meeting.
And you will know all the
You
policies
too,
that
Mom
are
and Dad.
updated.
Mom and Dad, same.
Yes.
Ever done the game where you draw straws? Nice way of saying you drew the short straw.
And you can see Ms. Millspaw for your credit before you leave.
If you don't have a paper to sign and you need credit, I'll take your name down and we'll make sure you get credit.
And if there's an end of exam.
You'll definitely want credit, yes.
All right,
Okay,
no problem. We are back in session. Is everybody ready?
ready.
All right, so we have suspended the 2 reading requirement, and so we are on 6.4052, did I say 6.4052, opioid antagonist?
I'll speak
Yes.
to it.
Yes, certainly.
Okay, so I was in a training where basically an expert on this spoke about it and explained the extreme opioid and drug problems that have been plaguing the nation and also our county, and just the huge spike in overdoses. And so he said, basically a lot of this has changed very quickly, even in the last year, that now all police officers carry this on their person. And he just spoke about how it can be the difference, basically like CPR and AED for an individual were they to overdose. Also, a lot of drugs are intentionally and sometimes unintentionally spiked with fentanyl, and so that also makes them way, way, way more potent. And that through his organization, which I don't have the name in front of me, but I sent it all to Dr. Horrell, schools can, and it's through the Department of Tennessee, but basically schools can get this completely free. The nurses just have to be trained, which is provided for free. Obviously, it takes school time for them to do that, but there wouldn't be an additional cost besides time on it. And and he also spoke to several schools, I don't want to name schools, but several schools in our district already had this. And several, he said, had already had an issue with the overdose, and they had gotten it in response to that. So I just asked Dr. Hoyle about it, and I think you alluded to it may even become a requirement soon or something.
That was speculation.
Oh, maybe not,
Yes,
okay.
yeah.
But it is a trend towards having this in the hopefully event we never have to use it situation. But if, if it were, we would have this, to be used while waiting on EMS, because sometimes it's just so severe, especially with the fentanyl in it, that just waiting on EMS may not be enough to save the potential person's life.
So one, I love the idea of this policy. I appreciate you bringing it to us. I agree with it in principle. I guess I have a question or a concern for Mr. Plumley, probably. Does this create any liability for the school system if we administer?
Sorry, I can
I'm sorry,
speak on
I
that
think
too.
Point of
Okay.
clarification, yeah.
they're asking you a question, Mr. Plumley, and I think Ms. Millspaw was trying to figure out if there was a motion.
We have a motion and second to get on.
Oops. Don't have it properly on the floor yet.
Yeah, did we not do it before he took a break?
Suspended the
We
rules.
suspended the rules.
Oh, we didn't actually, before he took the break. My apologies. Okay, then I'll make a motion to get the policy on the floor, and is there a second?
If I may, Madam Chair, I'd like to amend my vote for the reading to be included as a yes.
Okay.
I do like the policy. I just would like to understand the specifics a lot more, because I think Mr. Burnett is going to ask questions about liability, which was going to be my concerns on this, so.
I can answer.
But
Well,
not
we need to
yet.
do
Let's
this
get it
first,
properly
but-
on the floor.
Yeah, let's
So
do
I have a
this.
motion to be on the floor.
Do we have a second?
Do we have a second?
Second.
So we have a second. And then you have the amended vote for suspending the rules. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
It's
So-
part of the Good Samaritan law, and so there's not liability for it.
So,
I mean,
but my question, no offense, Ms. Childs, is directed to the school board
sure,
attorney.
I just wanted to make that comment.
Because we were trying to figure out the procedural.
Yes, sir, happily. So I fully support the idea of this policy. My only question is, would this create a liability for the board or for the school system if we administer this, knowing that we would be administering without parental approval because of the timeliness of administration and all of that?
Don't know that it would create any greater liability than the school already has for school from some emergency or function or whatever to a kid who is joking or doing anything else. Onto whether the child, whether the nurse, whatever the standard of school care is for a school nurse in that situation, and whether they deviated from it. Know that, so is that the trade name, opioid?
It's Narcan shot. I think it's administer a Narcan.
The brand name is Narcan, but that we would not be provided the brand name. So that's just the general category of what it's called.
Are there other situations where the school nurses who provide some type of drug without in an emergency situation,
EpiPen.
without
Yes.
a parent's approval?
An
EpiPens.
AED, if somebody's having a heart attack, I mean, or any, I mean, trained personnel
Stand
would.
by, if I may clarify, on EpiPens, and I can speak to this, you still have to, you give the EpiPen to the school at the beginning of the year with the understanding that they'll administer it in case there's a situation.
But an AED, you don't give them permission.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think my answer would be different than exposed to school no more than it already is anytime a nurse has to perform some type of
And I was, again, I agree with Ms. Childs as well. That would be my, as I've used the term shade tree attorney, understanding of the Good Samaritan law and application and use. But I wanted to ask you as well to have that kind of a question answered for us.
One of the questions I had was, the policy that is drafted, was this copied from any other school system?
There is a TSBA recommended policy on opioid antagonists. Now, just a little bit of history, and this has been 4 years ago, I think, that,
I think you said 2017.
2017? So,
That's what you told me.
6, okay, all right.
It's been a minute.
I couldn't do the math that quickly.
Right,
6 years ago, we had a coordinated school health coordinator, and this one came down as one of those that it is optional. Basically, it's saying if you're going to have these drugs on campus, or this medicine, however you put it on campus, then you must have a board policy. Now, basically, state law allows you to do this if you have a policy. TSBA has a recommended policy if you choose to do this. So I think there's a pretty good presumption that this has been run up the flagpole with the powers that be, and if you choose to do this. The nurse at the time wasn't comfortable with it and felt like it was premature at the time. The coordinated school health coordinator now, that Ms. Childs brought it back up, said, yeah, I think that would be a good idea. She talked to both of the school nurses. They said, yes, we think that would be a good idea. The coordinated school health coordinator, what she said was, I wouldn't be surprised if this becomes a requirement. She didn't say she's got some knowledge of it, but she said really some of the same things that Ms. Childs has noted. This is an epidemic. This fentanyl is everywhere, and the odds, unfortunately, are going up that we'd have a child in this situation.
No doubt the importance of it. I guess.
I know, I'm just giving the background.
I guess my hesitation earlier was just more or less what training would be provided to the nurse or the school personnel to provide this in order to correctly diagnose the issue.
It would be symptoms to look for and how to administer it.
So
And
does
it's-
that come from the Tennessee Department of Health? Who provides the training, I guess, is what?
Yes.
Who's gonna give our training to our nurses for this?
Yeah, it says the Tennessee Department of Health,
According to their guidelines.
according to their guidelines.
So you,
yeah.
you
No,
can't,
that says they shall be trained according to their guidelines, so who's doing the training, I guess? Yes. I get that they set the rules, but who did, is that, like, do we hire somebody to do it? Do they go to a class? Like, how does it work, I guess?
Ms. Childs again knows this. There's, yeah,
sorry.
she's
Yeah.
got the email. It's-
Trying to pull it up real quick. I apologize for not having already had
And,
it.
and I do have a question while you're looking for that. So it said, so reading this, just so the State Board of Education Policy 4.205, the district shall maintain an opioid antagonist at each school in at least 2 unlocked, secure locations to be administered to any student believed to be having a drug overdose. So we're required at this point to have drug, if I'm reading that.
If we pass this policy.
Well,
You're not required, you're not allowed if you don't have the policy.
no, I guess I'm saying the way that's worded.
Looking at state policy.
Yeah, so the state school
4205.
board policy says that you have to have a policy and then you're required to have it at 2 locations at every school. Is that right?
That's what,
Okay.
yes, if you pass a policy, do it.
Okay.
I think you could pass a policy that says the schools may at their discretion, but I think they're saying you either don't have a policy and therefore you cannot. We were instructed is you may not stock these drugs if your school board has not passed a policy saying that you shall.
I 100% love this. I just want to make sure we get the verbiage right to where we're fully protected and covered all the grounds. I just want to make sure I'm not missing something here.
The training Ms. Childs alluded to, if I may, I found it was the Memphis Area Prevention Coalition.
Thank you.
Is who's been training other school systems in the
Yes.
area. They are trained under the guidelines of the Tennessee Department of Health. They will
Yes,
provide
and
the
they're funded
drugs.
through the state, yes.
You can't get the drugs basically for your schools unless
Yes,
you go through these trainings.
training?
Yeah.
yes.
So we have training addressed and then in this policy, and then when I read, it says the school nurse or other trained school personnel may utilize. It doesn't say that it requires them to utilize. It says that they may utilize if they,
They would use their
their
discretion
training,
as medical
right.
professionals.
They're training
right.
to know whether. So, okay.
Yes, I also wanted to add, thank you for finding that too. Also wanted to add
sent it,
that, Mr. Plumley, that, from what I'm looking at, Tennessee Code 49-50-1604, there's law that says that, if schools have this and, if a student is injured or harmed due to the administration of an opioid antagonist to the student by a school nurse, school resource officer, or other trained school personnel, then those individuals would not be held responsible for the injury unless they administered it with an intentional disregard for safety. So if they are doing it, again, there's already lots of schools that do this, so there's already laws written about it and protecting the staff that, as long as they're trained and they're, administering it in the best of their ability, that they are covered liability for the school and for the employees under the Good Samaritan law that they, just like with AED or CPR, so.
Yeah. I think, as you alluded to, the Good Samaritan law, or the Good Samaritan rule, I think applies. If you see that their situation, you should go and address it. So I would like to thank you for bringing this forward, and as far as a policy, to me, I just had some questions. I'm glad you responded, and I support it.
Any more discussion on the policy? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item was our added item. That was discussion action on approval of interlocal agreement with Collierville Schools for transportation services.
I'll make a motion to get this item on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Roll?
Yes, this is just the latest iteration of a very effective partnership with Collierville Schools and the other municipalities to provide transportation services. I've got confirmation from the superintendent that there were no changes from the previous agreement, so we're just requesting an updated agreement.
Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
No further items.
Are there any announcements? No announcements. I'll make an announcement. I think at our next meeting, we'll, at least at our work session, won't it be?
The first day of school.
Yeah, the first day of
It
school. Or our next
always-
board meeting.
It
so-
always is, yeah.
Yeah, so very exciting times. Make sure you come early, come often. Get there early this year because traffic's gonna be great. It's gonna be fun. Nobody's gonna complain. The best idea is to ride the bus. Just my suggestion, because then you don't have to deal with all the traffic. But anyway, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion. I'll make the second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned.
Do the students, do you have any questions? It's over. I mean, if you want to